What if I told you that the most exhilarating moment of my life, the one that made me feel alive in ways I never imagined, wasn't with the man I married? Would you think less of me? Would you hate me? Maybe you'd understand, or maybe you wouldn't. Either way, you deserve to hear the truth. Here's my story. My name is Sarah, and on the surface, my life looks picture perfect. I'm 36 years old, married to Mike for 12 years. He's a good man, reliable, hardworking, and dependable. Together, we've built a comfortable life in a peaceful suburban neighborhood just outside Denver, Colorado. We have 2 kids, a golden retriever named Max, and a house with a white picket fence. If you saw me at the grocery store or a PTA meeting, you'd probably think I have it all. But beneath the polished exterior, my marriage has been on autopilot for years. Somewhere along the way, Mike and I stopped being us. We became more like roommates who share responsibilities, but not intimacy. The spark that once ignited my heart is now just a faint ember, barely warm. I never planned for this to happen. Never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who would step outside her marriage. I had always been loyal to Mike, even during the tough times. But 2024 changed everything. That year, something or someone shattered my predictable, controlled world and awakened feelings I thought I'd buried forever. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but it did, more than I could have imagined. This is where it begins. The year I crossed a line I could never uncross, and the year I discovered who I truly was, for better or worse. It started on an ordinary Tuesday in May, the kind of day that usually fades from memory. I had just dropped the kids off at school and stopped by a local coffee shop before heading to work. The shop was unusually busy, and as I stood in line, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, I felt someone's gaze on me. "Long line today, huh?" A deep, warm voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up and saw him. He had dark hair streaked with just enough gray to give him a distinguished look. His smile was easy, confident, and disarming. He wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, but something about him made him stand out. "Yeah," I replied with a polite smile. "This place always gets crowded when you're in a rush." He chuckled, and we exchanged a few words, just small talk at first. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room. It had been years since anyone had looked at me like that. Before I knew it, we were at the counter, ordering our drinks. He introduced himself as Jason, a marketing consultant who had recently moved to town. I told him I was an office manager and, for some reason, mentioned my husband and kids, maybe to remind both him and myself of the boundaries between us. "Nice to meet you, Sarah," he said, his eyes lingering on mine a moment longer than they should have. "Maybe I'll see you around." I nodded, feeling an unfamiliar flutter in my chest as I grabbed my coffee and walked out the door. That should have been the end of it, a fleeting encounter with a stranger. But it wasn't. The following week, I saw him again at the same coffee shop. This time, he waved me over to his table. I hesitated for a moment, but eventually sat down, telling myself it was harmless. We talked for nearly an hour, laughing and sharing stories about our lives. He made me feel seen, like I was more than just a wife and mother. That became our routine. Every Tuesday morning, we'd meet at the coffee shop. For 1 hour, I felt like a different version of myself, lighter, freer, and more alive. I didn't realize it at the time, but those coffee shop conversations were the start of something I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. If someone had told me months earlier that I'd be sitting here, bearing my soul about what happened, I would have laughed in disbelief. But there's no denying it now. That night was both the best and worst night of my life. A moment I'll never forget, no matter how much I wish I could. This kiss wasn't like any other. It was intense, filled with longing and a yearning I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just a kiss. It was an ignition of passion, a kind of desperation that blurred every line I was about to cross. In Jason's car that night, everything shifted. It wasn't a fairy tale moment, nor was it perfect, but it was raw, genuine, and deeply emotional. For the first time in years, I felt desired, valued, and utterly alive. Jason reminded me of a part of myself I thought had disappeared. A woman who wasn't just a wife or a mother, but someone who could be seen, understood, and wanted. In that fleeting moment, I ignored the repercussions and surrendered to the present. Afterward, as the silence filled the car, reality started to creep in. I gazed out at the shimmering city lights, my heart still pounding, and tried to process what had just happened. "I'm sorry." Jason broke the silence, his voice soft and uncertain. "I didn't mean to." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Don't apologize. I wanted this too." Even as I spoke, guilt began to wrap itself around me. I thought of Mike, of our children, of the commitments I'd made. And yet, despite the shame brewing inside me, I couldn't entirely regret what had happened. Jason took my hand, his touch warm and comforting. "You don't have to feel guilty, Sarah," he said gently. "You deserve to be happy." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to convince myself that one impulsive night could be justified, that it didn't define me. But deep down, I knew I had crossed a line I could never step back over. Life, as I knew it, would never be the same. Driving home that night, my thoughts swirled in a storm of emotions. I replayed every second, every word, every touch. When I walked through the front door, Mike was asleep on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering softly. I paused for a moment, watching him. A sharp pang of guilt hit me, searing through my chest. But alongside it was a feeling I couldn't ignore, an exhilaration that terrified me. I felt alive, and that scared me more than anything else. They say secrets have a way of unraveling lives, but mine didn't, at least not at first. I had control, or so I told myself. After that night, something inside me awakened. Jason had reignited a fire, a passion, that became impossible to ignore. But I was careful, meticulous, even. My secret was mine alone, and I wasn't about to let it slip. Mike remained oblivious. Our lives had become such a predictable routine that my occasional absences went unnoticed. If anything, he seemed relieved when I told him I was attending a new yoga class or meeting up with friends. I even fabricated a book club as part of my carefully constructed alibi. Each lie was calculated, each story rehearsed. The mornings after my time with Jason were the most difficult. I'd return home with his touch still vivid in my mind, only to step back into my role as a wife and mother. I kissed my good morning, prepared the kids' lunches, and carried on as though nothing had changed. But inside, everything had shifted. Jason and I began stealing moments together, an extended lunch here, a quiet drive there. We were discreet, never meeting in the same place twice. We both understood the stakes. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Jason asked one evening, as we lay entwined in each other's arms in a secluded hotel room. "Every day," I confessed, staring at the ceiling. "But not enough to stop." Jason nodded, his hand tracing gentle patterns on my shoulder. "I don't want to be a secret, Sarah," he admitted, his voice low. "But I know this is all we have, for now at least." His words hung in the air like a bittersweet truth neither of us wanted to face. We both chose to live in the present, clinging to stolen moments that felt too intoxicating to let go. That summer, Jason and I took a day trip to the mountains. It was one of the few times we allowed ourselves more than a brief escape. Far from prying eyes, we found a hidden spot by a serene lake. The sun warmed my skin as I dipped my feet into the cool water, and for a few precious hours, the world felt far away. Sitting on the edge of the dock, Jason held my hand, his thumb gently brushing against mine. "I wish we could stay like this forever," he murmured. "Me too," I whispered, my voice barely audible. That day felt like a dream. We laughed, shared stories, and held each other close under the open sky. When he kissed me there, with the sun setting and the lake shimmering, it felt as though time stood still. But dreams are fleeting, and reality always found a way to pull me back. Even so, I couldn't let go of those moments. They were my refuge, my sanctuary, my escape from a life that felt stifling. As I sit here in 2025, reflecting on the events of last year, I often think about that perfect day by the lake. It was, without a doubt, the highlight of 2024. But as I face the year ahead, I find myself wondering, will my best moment of 2025 come from my husband? I want to believe it could, that Mike and I could rediscover the connection we lost and rekindle the spark that faded. But deep down, I know the truth. Once you've experienced something that sets your soul on fire, how do you return to the life you once knew?